Hospital walls have seen more sincere prayers than any church, but no matter what, science is the one which cures you. G'day, I'm Gordon Hepworth on a very rainy day. Seriously, when somebody has been in hospital and has recovered from a very serious illness or injury, and their relatives go, "Oh, it's from God, it's a miracle, it's this, it's that," doesn't it piss you off? Isn't that an insult to the paramedics who scraped him up off the road after the road smash, or administered CPU after the heart attack? Isn't that an insult to the hard-working nurses in the emergency ward? Isn't that a terrible insult to the doctors? The ones who spent years and years practicing their craft in medical school, and then several more years learning their particular field of specialization. And if you point that out to these Christians who say it was all God's doing that their relative pulled through, they'll say, the doctors and the nurses for sure, but it was God's hand that guided them. Let's look at that crap a little bit more. What happens if, let's say, the doctor was a Hindu? Was it Krishna who guided that surgeon's hand? Was it Shiva, the ones with all the arms, the 8 arms? Or what about that elephant-headed god that the Hindus have? Maybe it was him. Sorry, up the back? The Christian, yeah. It was a Christian god. Okay. What about if the Hindu doctor had just done surgery successfully on a Hindu man? You, the Christian again? It was still a Christian god. Okay, what about if the Christian had been travelling through India and was in a Hindu hospital, Hindu doctors, Hindu nurses, Hindu paramedics, and had pulled him through? What do you mean, don't be silly? No, I'm talking to you, the Christian. What do you mean, don't be silly? Was it a Christian god that pulled through this person in India who had all the Hindus around who did all the work? Can you see the stupidity of it? You up there, the Muslims, stop smiling, because this applies equally to you. There is no God, people. I'm in the town of Murwillumbah, and behind me you see the Tweed River. Murwillumbah has a bad history of flooding. And every time it's flooded, you've had Christians who've said this is the work of God, it's the anger of God, it's punishment upon the people for forsaking the path of the Lord. And do you remember when New Orleans went under with that terrible flood after that equally terrible hurricane? You had so-called Christians there saying it was the work of the God, saying it was the work of the Lord, who were punishing New Orleans for being so wicked. Well, after New Orleans had been through that terrible hurricane, the terrible flood, for people to come and say New Orleans was wicked and were being punished, tell you what, it was those people who were saying that crap who were the wicked ones. But back to Murwillumbah. When Murwillumbah floods, it can be devastating, as you can imagine. The industry is wiped out, the buildings go under, and so the town of Murwillumbah built flood mitigation works, and it kept the floods down. But you didn't hear the Christians talking then about how great the engineers were and the workers and all the people who built that. Oh no. Anyway, they then had a really bad flood, I mean a bad one, that overtopped the flood mitigation levies. So then the Christians came out again saying, you see, God doesn't forget, God is punished. It actually makes me angry when they do that. Anyway, then the town built real flood mitigation. Let me turn this camera around. Do you see that wall there? It's a long, long wall. It goes for a long way. And those gates can be locked and sealed to prevent water getting out. The Murwillumbah flood mitigation scheme, and it goes on to tell you about it. The town has experienced a number of major floods causing substantial economic costs to the community. To comprehend the magnitude of this type of flooding, during the March 1974 event, floodwaters entered the main business centre, causing inundation in a number of buildings up to the first floor level. Anyway, they've now built more flood mitigation, that wall you saw behind me, and this here tells you what was done. About the original earth levee was replaced by a higher reinforced concrete levee, the height of the earth levee was raised, etc. And that tells you all about it. So since this wall behind me was built, there hasn't actually been a big enough flood to test it. But the engineers are confident it will hold. It's going to have to be awful bad, the flood, to overtop that wall, isn't it? Do you hear the Christians coming out and praising the Lord for the engineers and the designers, for the intelligence of these people and the teaching, the education of these people who did that? No, they're very silent. The Christians, and I shouldn't keep saying Christians, the religious people, because other religions are just as bad, will come out at times of disaster and thunder about how it's God's anger. But when intelligent man brings science to bear on things like this, the religious people stay very quiet. So what about other scientific achievements? What about when man went to the moon? Yeah, I know that there are conspiracy theorists who say that it never happened. Man never did go to the moon. It all took place in the Arizona desert or somewhere. What about the shuttle missions? Didn't hear too much from the religious people there about how great the science was behind it. Although I did, when Challenger exploded, that awful tragedy, I did hear one religious Christian sect somewhere in the deep south of the USA saying that it was God's will that made that happen, because man was becoming too impertinent by going into space. So whenever the tragedies happen, the religious people come out in droves to say how it was all God's will. But with each advance in science that mankind makes, they sort of shut up, don't they? Or they try to disprove that it was science, just like the creationists are trying to this day to disprove evolution or to downplay it. Perhaps it takes some clear thinking to realize that there is no God. It also takes a lot of impertinence, that word again, to say that man had nothing to do with sending other men into space via the shuttle missions, but that when Challenger exploded, that was the hand of God.